We are on page 634. We're talking about the positive commandments of Shabbat. And it says, besides what is forbidden. For those who don't know, Derech Hashem. Okay. Besides what is forbidden, so as not to damage the honor of the sanctity that is provided on this day, as we have mentioned, you can look on with him, it'll be much more helpful. So again, besides what is forbidden, so as not to damage the honor of the sanctity of the day that is provided on this day, as we have mentioned, we have further been commanded to honor this very sanctity that is being provided. So he explains, Ramchal seems to be adding here that the desecration of the Shabbat actually degrades the sanctified status of Shabbat. It is not only a missed opportunity for the person to attain a greater level of spirituality. Thus, in addition to the prohibitions on Shabbat, there are positive commandments that one must perform to enhance the sanctity of the Shabbat. So that is the principle of delighting on the Shabbat, what we call Oneg Shabbat. The verse states in Yeshayahu and Isaiah, you shall proclaim Shabbat a delight. Then you will delight in Hashem. The Gemara derives from this that one should delight in the Sabbath with special food. How are you, sir? On page 634. Honoring it on its arrival and departure with Kiddush and Havdalah, and the rest of the details. So he says, Shabbat is like an important guest who, besides the greeting he receives upon arrival, is also escorted out when he departs. That is, the escorting out is what we call Malav HaMalka. Right? And the bringing in is Kiddush, the leaving out, which is the Malav HaMalka, which we'll be having here December 24th. That's the first night of Hanukkah. And so it's also going to be the day that we have a Malav HaMalka here. Of course, everybody has Malav HaMalka every single Moshe Shabbat. This perspective helps us understand why we call it Motzei Shabbat, the going out of Shabbat, the departure of Shabbat, rather than simply saying that Shabbat has ended. It is because Shabbat is not just a period of time that has ended. Shabbat has brought sanctity to the world. When Shabbat ends, the entire Shefa of sanctity departs, leaving behind the world in its natural physical state. So all of these matters that on the whole are based upon this foundation, which is to maintain ourselves in the appropriate manner for the sanctity that is provided for us, and to cherish this stature and treasure for its sake of honoring its concept, which is tremendous closeness to Hashem and the attainment of intense Devekis to Him. So he explains, perhaps this suggests that every person receives Shefa on Shabbat according to his spiritual level, and that he must keep Shabbos accordingly. One on a higher level should be more stringent. The more we honor the Shabbat through external action, the more we internalize an appreciation that helps us get the most of it. And the more we become sanctified by Shabbat, the closer we come to Hashem, who is the source of all sanctity. This Devekis to Hashem is impossible to acquire during the week. And finally, thus honoring Shabbat accomplishes two things. One, it makes us realize its true worth, that we will prepare ourselves better for its holiness and thereby attain more closeness and Devekis to Hashem. That's number one. And number two, it's a way of honoring Hashem by properly appreciating the precious gift He lovingly gave us. So he continues to say the particulars of the matters related to the honor of Shabbat correspond to the particulars of the sanctity, and its dimensions, its means, and what emerges from it are truly as they are truly meant to be. He explains all the various laws of Shabbat, the detailed prohibitions, along with the obligations to honor it, gives the opportunity to receive its shefa of sanctity. But besides fulfillment of actual laws, we should certainly make ourselves recognize, feel, and appreciate the gift of Shabbat that Hashem has given us. So we're seeing there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Shabbat. It's not just simply not doing certain acts or making Kiddush or whatever that's going to be. What the Ramchal is saying is a very beautiful thing, that Shabbat infuses the chef of that day is infused the very sanctity that is there. That now, when I break that, when I desecrate the Shabbat, I've degraded that sanctity. Not only did I break Shabbat, but I've taken away the spirituality of it. That's why people who drive on Shabbat or go shopping or whatever they're going to do, it's a day off for some people. When they do that, they've lost so much without realizing it. That's the saddest thing. It truly is the saddest thing.
Well, it's problematic. Walking long distances. So.
What do you mean?
That's another discussion, the whole driving on Shabbat thing.
No, so the answer to that, I mean, obviously you don't, for those who want to go to shul, or those who want to be in community, either they move there full time, which is the desired result, or they get a Shabbos home, or they stay over in a place where they can, like the Torah Center rents out rooms for Shabbat. Okay, so there's ways for people not to have to drive in order to be part of the community. It's the people who choose, for one reason or another, to drive. But I'm not even talking about that. That's, by the way, a level. If I'm going to drive to shul and back, I'm not saying this is permissible by any stretch of imagination, but it's a level. What do I mean? Because I have a choice. If I'm driving, I have a choice of what I'm going to do. I have a choice to go golfing, shopping, movies, whatever I want to do. The world's in front of me. And I choose to go to shul. I choose to participate in some Jewish thing, Shabbaton. I choose to do that. Well, I'm not going to denigrate that person. I'm not going to say the person, are they sinning? Yes. Are they doing everything wrong? No. I mean, there's a positive to that. They're identifying with what Jews do. So I don't want to totally discount that. It's not. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and neither is he. What he's saying is, when you desecrate it, you have to recognize you're degrading the sanctity of the Shabbat itself. That is here. That's something else. Okay, that's what I'm saying. He's not condemning somebody one way or the other. He's saying, understand what you're doing. Okay, so now let's continue. He says, next page. So the divine wisdom decreed to Israel even more holiness, and he gave them days of holiness besides for the Shabbat, when Israel can receive some of the various degrees of holiness. However, all of them are of a lesser degree than the degree of the Hashpah and the holiness of Shabbat. And he explains all the Yom Kippur has its own unique status, not found in Shabbat. The sanctity of the Shabbat is never less stronger than even that of Yom Kippur. That is a holiest day of the year is Shabbat. Let's understand that. Not Rosh Hashanah, not Yom Kippur. The holiest day is every week. It's namely Shabbat. Relative to the degree of hashpah of these days, we are required to detach ourselves from worldly involvement. He says, just as we learned that it's necessary to detach ourselves from worldly involvement in order to access the holiness of Shabbat, so too is it necessary in order to access the holiness available on these other days. So corresponding to this are the prohibitions of certain malachot, certain forbidden actions on these days. And he says, the greater the sanctity available, the more we have to detach ourselves from the physical involvement which prevents us from accessing that sanctity. By the way, this would also be an answer, a metaphysical answer to the Shabbos switch, for those who remember that argument that was going back and forth, whether or not it's good. Regardless, I'm not going to get into the halacha of whether or not it's good. Most people said it's not. But again, I'm not going to get into that argument. That's not for me. It's for the greater minds. What's going on here is a metaphysical statement that when I have the opportunity to detach myself from that, not even get involved with touching a switch. That's what I should be doing, which is why we said before timers were a big thing, Rev Moshe said you shouldn't use timers. There's nothing wrong with a timer. Even according to him, there's nothing wrong with a timer. But what passes on Shabbos, it just didn't go for Shabbos. It wasn't within the spirit of Shabbat. That's how he held. Okay, so today now we all have timers. We didn't listen to that truth, obviously. We all have timers. We do what we're going to do. They're in the wall timers. Okay, but now to go further and to get a telephone that uses a grama or whatever else is going to be, so I can text somebody or I can do what I'm going to do. Again, even if it's permissible, you shouldn't do it, because what you're doing is engaging in worldly matters again. I need to text so much. Well, how should children do? I need to text, really? Or I need to find out what the baseball score was. I need to find out. No, I don't need to find these things out. I'll find out 24 hours later. I can figure it out too. It's not, my world's not going to come crashing down. And that's what he's saying. The more that the greater the sanctity, the more you need to detach yourselves from the mundane matters.
Rav Moshe didn't like timers, huh?
No, he was against it.
I wonder about the Shabbos lamps now, because it's on, but you have to rotate it.
Right.
You actually have to handle it to shed light.
Or to turn off, to block.
Yeah, but
to block or let it in. Right.
To block it, yeah.
I'm saying to block it or to let it in. You have to do it. Yeah. I don't know what he would say. I'm not sure. It's nothing wrong with it per se, but again, it's that's the different thing. I'm not going to get involved in every single thing we have, but
okay. That's it.
I'm just saying the more you detach yourself is what the Ramchal is looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Would that be a case of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law?
Yes, it is the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Absolutely. Where again, he's using metaphysical terms. Right. Am I saying it right?
Hypothetical?
Oh, metaphysical. I'm going above the physical. So it could, yeah. So it's, but yeah, it's 100% true. Just because I can do it doesn't necessarily mean I should do it, because it could be breaking the spirit of the law, which is, again, I'll give an example. I could use a timer on my, and for those who watch TV, I could use my timer on the TV. Could set it, and I could have it go on and off. Or if you want to be a little more divorced than that, you could have your DVDs today. DVD, that's what you set. Mm-hmm. I think it used to be a VCR, now I think it's a DVD. And you can set it for 10 different things, and they can record everything, so you never have to miss a darn thing. But again, is that, you didn't break any halacha. Let's understand. You broke no halacha. The question is that what you should be doing? And if you couldn't do it, what would you watch your TV? So that's, but I wouldn't, but if somebody needed to do it because they want to see the game, I'm not going to say, well, you shouldn't do it. They're not at that level. You understand what I'm saying? To everybody you have to be at level. Some people aren't at one level, they're at a different level. So you go with everybody's level and let them decide. But what he's saying is the more you detach yourself, the better it's going to be. That's what it says again. I'll just say it one more time. Relative to the degree of hashpah of these days, we are required to detach ourselves from worldly involvement. Corresponding to this are the prohibitions of certain malachot of those days. Yom Kippur stands above all of them, and following are the Yomim Tovim, followed by Rechol HaMoed, and followed by Rosh Chodesh, which, other than for women, does not involve refraining from malacha. So he says, the sanctity of Yom Kippur is greater than all of the holy days. There is therefore a complete cessation of malacha on Yom Kippur, just like on Shabbat. However, since the sanctity is not as great as Shabbat, the penalty for violating its sanctity is not as severe as that of the Shabbat we're talking about from the courts. On Yom Tov Malachot, again, different types of works, dealing with the preparation of food are permissible, and the punishment for violating its sanctity is less severe than even Yom Kippur. And then you have Chol HaMoed, so it's a further relaxation of the restrictions of these malachot on Chol HaMoed, when most activities for the need of this festival are permitted, as well as any malacha that involves financial loss. And then he says, the Rashi to Megillah explains that Hashem gave this mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh to the women, because they refused to participate in the episode of the golden calf. So Rav Chaim Friedlander adds that even for women, it is only customary to refrain from malachot and not an obligation. So furthermore, the custom applies only to certain melachot, such as sewing. As such, is considered a day of minimal restraint from the malacha, indicative of its possessing lesser status. And finally, for Chanukah and Purim, which did not consist of refraining of any malacha at all, he says the Jewish people did not accept upon themselves to refrain from malacha on Purim. Similarly, there is no obligation against performing malacha on Chanukah. However, this creates a difficulty. Just as women have a custom not to do certain malachot on Rosh Chodesh, they have a similar custom not to do malacha while the Chanukah candles are burning. In other words, the first half hour, some actually say until they quit. So this, but the halacha is you only have to burn a half hour into the night. So why, therefore, should Chanukah be considered of lesser sanctity than Rosh Chodesh? As possible answer is that the custom of not performing malacha on Chanukah only applies when the candles are burning, not during the entire day. This is because the custom is related to the prohibition against deriving benefit from the light of the candles, and not the sanctity of the day. Okay, so that's what they want to argue. So rather, he says, there is Thanksgiving on Chanukah, and that's what the Allah Nisan prayer concludes. And they established these 8 days of Chanukah to express thanks and praise to your holy name, and as well as rejoicing as well on Purim. On Purim, the things are given to as the Gemara states, the reading of the Megillah is its praise. In addition, there is a mitzvah of rejoicing. However, neither on Chanukah nor Purim is there any prohibition against performing malacha, which indicates a lesser degree of sanctity than of Rosh Chodesh. All this is relative to the degree of shefa provided and the specific light that radiates on those days. So it says the amount of sanctity of the day, its shefa and its light is reflected through the range of malachot that are prohibited on that day. So we're all set. We understand the more sanctity, the less malacha can be done. The less sanctity, the more malacha can be done. Right? Sometimes we accept it upon ourselves that we would not do malacha, such as Chanukah. That we would. Right. So sometimes it's customary not to do malacha, such as Rosh Chodesh, and other times with Chanukah and Purim, while even women will not do work while the candles are lit, because that's their special mitzvah, and that's all because of the story of Yehudis, how she killed the Greek guy, and so on and so forth. So they have a special mitzvah, during Chanukah. Chanukah was also a decree against the women that before they got married. So the Greek governor, or whatever he was called, was supposed to defile the bride before she gets to the chuppah, and that was to, besides denigrating the Jewish people, also to make them, one of the forbidden things we have is to have forbidden sexual relations. And so they want to just demean the whole system. And so it was a really attack against women. And that's another reason why women have a greater stake in the celebration, if you will, of Chanukah. Good. So the Ramchal now examines other features of various holy days. However, besides for the sanctity measured by the degrees of accordance with the degree of holiness on these days, there are also specifically unique matters for each of these times reflective of each one's nature. So he says the amount of sanctity for on the day in Shefa and this light is reflected through the range of malachot that are created on that day, like we said, and in the various sections, previous sections of the Ramchal describe the hierarchy of the sanctity of the various holy days, resulting in various degrees of prohibited malachot. Ramchal now teaches that there are also unique qualities of each of these holy days, resulting in specific practices connected to each of them. So he says the root of all of them is the order that the divine wisdom has arranged, that regarding every rectification that's taken place, and any great light that has shone at any of these times, when that period of time recurs each year, a light similar to the original light that shone on the day will shine upon us. And the outcome of the rectification will be renewed to all who are willing to accept it. So it says a person needs to prepare himself to receive the renewed rectification. This is something we keep hearing, that we need to prepare ourselves for it. We can't just walk into it unprepared, which is an interesting concept if you think about it. It's like you go into a class, okay? How should you walk into a class? What?
Ready to go?
Not only ready to go, you should walk in prepared. What does preparation for a class mean? Reading ahead. Reviewing what was said before. If you're in a language class, it means reviewing the words, reviewing the grammar. Not really. I mean, Bill was a teacher of how many years?
About 38 years.
38 years. And if there would have been kids, there were some kids, but if all of the students would have kept reviewing the rules as they went on, his class would have been easier, but also by the time they finished, it would have been a very high level. Okay, really, that's what goes on. As Jews, we have an obligation to learn. Like I said, for all these other classes, we have a tremendous obligation to learn. And the more we learn, the more we review. Not only go ahead. Going ahead is what everybody loves to do. But reviewing is the hardest thing to do. Because at the Yetzer Hara it says, you don't need to review. We'll see it again sooner or later. Keep going, keep finishing. You want to finish. It's a joke. Because by the time I finish it, I don't know what I read in the beginning. But if I review it and I try to incorporate into my life, then I'm accomplishing something. That's the point. As it says in Pirkei Avot, the learning is not the main thing. The doing is the main thing. Again, I refer back to my lecture from Sunday, Jewish Jeopardy. That it's a major thing that we have to remember, that it's not enough to just learn it. If I don't incorporate this, if I don't prepare myself for the shefa, for the daily shefa that's being brought to you by God. If I don't prepare myself for that, then I miss the opportunity. That's why I like to go to Minyan, because it gives me that extra added oomph for the day. If I prepare for it, if I walk in with my eyes closed and I'm sleepwalk through life, so then I'm not going to get it. That's how it works.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
the problem with this right now is usually I listen to this when I'm in bed. So when I'm sleeping right now, but I usually listen to this when I'm in bed. Oh, okay.
I wasn't picking on you.
No, I know.
I appreciate the guilt,
You're sleepy.
but I wasn't picking on you. I didn't mean that as a direct hit, but
I was sort of fitting in and out. I heard people need to be in active when they're all sleeping.
Okay. Okay, I'm saying My point is that we had to prepare. So, by the way, even if you prepare before you by listening to this later on, and then you look at the book, and so on and so forth, that's the point of preparation too. In other words, it's not good enough just to listen one time to class, although it's great for my stats, no question about that. Over 6,000 hit and nearly 7,000 hits on this stuff, but it's that's why we even count when I hit 10,000.
This book is kind of based on what you're just saying now, because you have to remember everything that's gone before, and it keeps building and building.
Correct.
And building.
Correct.
But it's the same thing that they're saying in this chapter, that as you go to higher levels, you have to work harder.
Correct.
It's
Right.
It's a geometric progression that you.
And that's what we want to get to. We want to get to understanding, because we can just read. It wouldn't take long to read this book. If I would just stick to the script, if you will, okay? The script is very small. Besides the notes, fine, but the script is pretty small. And the only reason the book is over 700 pages for this thing? Is,
Roughly.
600 odd. Okay, so the only reason is because it's Hebrew, English notes. But really, it's a small book. It's about this thick.
It's just a little bit.
It's all there is. There's nothing to this book. But what you have, and if you look at how many classes we've had in this, it's an amazing amount of classes just to try to get through this book. But really, it's a small book. But it's supposed to be something that, again, every day we're working. Not only with this, but with Chumash, with Gemara, with Mishnah, with Halacha, with other books of Musar, with our history. There's so much, with Tanakh in general, there's so much that we're supposed to be involving ourselves. Wait 1 second. I'm on a roll here. It's so much supposed to be involved. But again, the point should never just be to amass knowledge. That's never the point. The point is lama'aseh, to do it. Yeah.
If I have a good memory, I'm pretty sure we started this somewhere right before the redoing the tour center. We started the class.
Okay, so it's over a year.
Yeah.
Right.
Well over, yes.
Yeah. Again, if you look online, you'll see how many classes are just in here. We've gone up and down with students as a result of that. But it's a daily grind. Let's face it. I'm doing it weekly, but if you were doing again a daily grind of going through, and going ahead, knowing what's going to be said, having that sort of interaction, growing more and more and more. The more we put, the point is, the more effort, the fum sa'ara agra, according to the effort you put in, is going to be the reward. And that's what we're saying here. And so also with Shefa, also with getting this holiness, I can walk into Shabbos, and I can fall asleep into Shabbos, and I can sleep my way through Shabbos. I haven't broken Shabbos, but I haven't allowed that spirituality to emanate and to go into my body, go into my soul. I haven't done that. And I know people who can sleep the whole Shabbos through, miss everything. They didn't break it. That's clear. But they also didn't accomplish what they could have. Okay?
There's something to be said for rest. For those of us who are working the rest of the week.
The rest isn't being comatose.
You do it your way.
No. It's not my way versus your way. It's my way versus God's way.
Yeah, I know.
Let's understand that. And Hashem knew what was best for us, to make Kiddush, to do certain things. He knew what was best for us. Okay, so now based upon this, we were commanded in the holiday of Pesach and all the matters, and all of the matters that we were commanded for recollecting the Exodus from Egypt. And he explains all the intricate laws concerning chametz and much of the laws and customs of the Seder, and at the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the fulfillment of the laws involved in the Pesach sacrifice. For since that rectification is an extremely great rectification by which we were rectified, you got all those rectifications, as we have mentioned above, It was established that when that period of time recurs each year, a light will shine upon us similar to the light that shone upon them. Shone upon...
That shone then.
I knew something was wrong. That shone then, and the outcome of that very same rectification will be renewed within us. As a result of this, we are obligated in all of those matters on Pesach. He said the mitzvot and the prohibitions of Pesach allow us to annually renew the experience of redemption attained through the rectification achieved during the Exodus. We can thus call Pesach the time of our freedom, because we too experience a sense of redemption from evil each year through the performance of the mitzvot of Pesach. In this manner is a holiday of Shavuot regarding the giving of the Torah. Each year we receive a renewal of the revelation at Sinai through our observance of the mitzvot of Shavuot. The Ramchal compares the great revelation at Sinai to that of the future redemption depicted in Isaiah. Right? Fine. Similarly, the holiday of Sukkot renews rectification regarding the clouds of glory. And he says this follows the accepted view in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch that our Sukkah commemorates the clouds of glory that accompanied and protected the Jewish people during the 40 years of their sojourn in the wilderness. Even though the phenomenon of the clouds of glory was not specifically at that time, in other words, the clouds of glory existed continuously year-round during the entire sojourn in the wilderness, thus there should be no specific time of the year to commemorate them. Nonetheless, the Torah established this holiday as a commemoration of this event. So he says the Ramchal does not explain why. He does not explain here why, in fact, that we do mark the phenomenon of the clouds of glory at that time. However, according to the Vilna Gaon, there is a direct correlation between the 15th of Tishrei, on the days when Sukkot is celebrated, and the clouds of glory. This is so because work began on the Mishkan on that day, whereupon the Shekhinah that left as a result of the sin of the golden calf now returned. Sukkot is thus celebrated on the 15th of Tishrei to mark the return of the Shekhinah represented by the clouds of glory. The Torah, though, maintains that Sukkot is celebrated in Tishrei only because sitting in a sukkah during that season will be a clear demonstration of the mitzvah observance. It does not mark any particular event at that time, so we have an argument as to why we sit in the sukkah at that time and what the clouds of glory, did they come back, didn't they come back, what's going on, fine. Thus, this is as is written that I settled the children of Israel in protective shade. She says, the verse in context states, you shall live in thatched roof huts for a 7-day period, so that generations will know that I settled the children of Israel in protective shade when I took them out of the land of Egypt. Similarly, Chanukah and Purim undergo each year a renewal of the rectification that took place at the time of those events. Therefore, the mitzvahs of those days, including the thanksgiving and rejoicing mentioned above, renew the rectification that took place at the times of those miracles. And in this manner were all the days of the entire Megillus Tainus rectified. Now he explains, what is Megillus Tainus? Megillus Tainus contains a list of days that were established as days of rejoicing due to the miraculous salvation from misfortune that took place on these days. Each of these days opens a window to a time of recurring salvation. As such, they were established as joyous days for the renewal of the rectification that occurred on those days. Now, the truth is we don't celebrate most of those days anymore. They all went into, I forget what they call it. We don't do them anymore. But he's going to explain. So he says, in this manner were all the days of the entire Megillah Tainus rectified, except that they were annulled because Israel was unable to sustain them, and Israel was therefore exempted from making commemoration for those days for an arousal of the light that shines then. and then he says we're going to explain each of these mitzvot individually. So he explains that there were so many days of salvation from misfortune that they would have had to establish a holiday every day. So the Ramchal seems to be suggesting from his words that they were exempt. They were exempted, that the light of those days still shines even without their commemoration. So let's go. Concerning, yeah.
It says that there would be if we observed all the times that we were saved from disaster, there'd be a celebration every day.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a good thing because we were saved from disaster, but just as this other side of the coin, there's a lot of disaster we almost fell into.
True.
Was that on our fault? Most of those disasters, I would have to guess.
Disasters are always our fault.
Right.
I mean, that's just part of the game. But disasters only happen is because we are not following the Torah. If we would follow the Torah, we would be instantaneous. I'm talking about all of us, not just a few of us. If all of us would suddenly do tshuva and we would all follow the Torah, accepting Hashem as the King, and just doing it, we would all be swept up very quickly on whatever El plane Hashem wants to use, or however He wants to do it, and we would all be living in Eretz Yisrael. We would all be in a land of peace. We wouldn't have a fight about Medinat Yisrael versus Eretz Yisrael versus whatever the ridiculous fights are. Our Arab brethren would not do anything to us because they would understand that this is what has to be, and we'll be in good shape. But until we actually get to those messianic days, we have to put up with all this stuff, but we should understand that we are responsible. We're not now. With that said, I'm not going to give any one of our haters a free ticket here. Just because we're sinning and we're going to be punished, they don't have to pick up the mantle and punish us. Okay, let's understand that. And when they do, they will be punished, because if you look at history. And the Ramchal, not Ramchal, Talmud Devar says that that people like Haman and Cherev, and he didn't know Hitler, but Hitler, all these guys who took off the desire, Mussolini, and we have so many enemies out there, that they all picked up the mantle to want to kill us and the sword, and they were just too happy to do it. Well, ultimately, evil was reverted onto them. Because it's true that we have to be punished, but by Hashem says, you deserve punishment. But it doesn't mean that I have to, or the enemy has to be happy to do it. He shouldn't. You should leave it to Hashem. You want to punish him? Punish him. You have a lot of different ways to punish. You don't need me to do it. Which is what happened to one of the in Tanakh. I forget who it was. I want to say Nebuzaradan, but I'm not sure it was him. Sorry?
One of the Roman emperors?
It wasn't, he wasn't Tanakh. It would be before then. But it could have actually. I shouldn't say no. Yeah, that one. What was his name? That was Roman?
Yeah.
I thought that was Greek.
I'm sure it was Roman.
Okay, could be. Yeah, Gesundheit. But that person who said, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to be your pawn, I'm not getting involved. And he went to, I think the guy converted or something. He's not interested in this. And he was right. Why? If I see that I'm going to lose because of this, now it's Babylonian. It's Babylonian. He wasn't Roman. I'm pretty sure it was Babylonian. He said, I'm going to lose in the end, so I'm not going to do it. But that was smart. He was smart. You have plenty of people. You have plenty of ways to beat your people up. You don't need me. So, yes, ultimately it's our fault. But, again, I'm not giving anybody a pass on what they're doing. They don't have to be the ones to do it. Leave it to God. Right. And that's why when David is saying, Vayomer David to God, let me fall into the hands of Hashem rather than the enemies. Hashem will have compassion. My enemies will have no compassion. Okay. So the Ramchal begins his explanation with the mitzvot associated with Pesach. And he says the concept of chametz and matzah is the following. Until the exodus from Egypt, Israel was intermingled among the nations. A nation in the midst of a nation. He said this in reference to Devarim, describing the exodus from Egypt. Or has the question in the Torah is, or has any God performed such miracles to come and to take for himself one nation from amidst another nation? The Jewish people were so entrenched in Egypt that the Midrash, based on this verse, compares the way that Hashem took them out to a shepherd extracting a fetus from an animal's womb. With their departure, they were redeemed and separated from the other nations. And they were redeemed from the Egyptian servitude and then separated spiritually from other nations. Until that time, all aspects of the physical bodies of mankind were obscured by the darkness and contamination that prevailed over them as a result of Adam and Rishon's sin. With the Exodus, Israel were separated from the other nations, and their physical bodies were readied for purification to prepare them for the Torah and the service of Hashem. For this purpose, they were commanded with the removal of chametz from their possession and to eat matzah. So he explains, they were readied to receive all the commandments of the Torah. The Mara Derech, however, understands that this as two separate aspects. Their bodies were ready for purification during the 49 days immediately following the Exodus, and their bodies were prepared for Torah and the service of Hashem through the giving of the Torah at Sinai, along with a special 3-day preparation. By removing the chametz, we minimize the effect of the darkness and contamination created by the sin of Adam Rishon, and by eating matzah, we purify our bodies to serve Hashem. So the Ramchal explains how refraining from chametz and eating matzah accomplishes this. This is because the bread that is prepared as man's nourishment is truly appropriate for the desired state of man. The idea of leavening, which is a natural element within the bread, makes it easily digestible and good tasting. Is also the result of the dictates that are benefiting man, for he too needs to have an evil inclination and a tendency towards physicality for a specific and appraised amount of time, namely during Pesach for 7 days starting from 15th of Nisan. Israel is required to refrain from chametz and to be nourished by matzah, to diminish within themselves the force of the evil inclination and the tendency of physicality, and to intensify within themselves closeness to spirituality. He says, chametz must not be in our possession for all 7 days, but the requirement to eat matzah is only in the first night of Pesach. According to the view of the Vilna Gaon, one who eats matzah on the additional days fulfills a mitzvah as well. In any event, matzah is the only bread option for all of Pesach. And by eating matzah, which is less tasty and digestible, and therefore less connected to this world, so that you're going to intensify your closeness to spirituality. In Ma'amar Chachma, the Ramchal writes that matzah is a food that is associated with the concept of the good inclination without the Yetzer Hara at all. Because what's the Yetzer Hara? The Yetzer Hara is that which is puffed up, right? So if I have a leavening product, that's the whole point of matzah. That's one of the, not the point, it's one of the midrashim about matzah. The matzah doesn't have that, so also the chametz are puffed up, so also we need to get rid of our arrogance. However, to be nourished in this way constantly is not possible, because this is not the desired goal while in this world, which is the physical world. Since eating matzah is so beneficial, one might ask, why shouldn't we eat matzah all year round? The Ramchal answers that Hashem wants us to have free will and the Yetzer Hara in this world so we can earn the Olam Haba. Nevertheless, during the days that were appraised for this, it is befitting that Israel should observe this matter. In this manner, they will maintain the level that is appropriate for them. So he says the days of Pesach leave one with the proper balance and maintaining a certain distance from the Yetzer Hara throughout the year. Imam HaChachma, the Ramchal, writes that eating matzah during Pesach has a lasting effect of preparing us for holiness all year round. So he says this is a primary concept of the festival of Pesach, festival of Matzah. The other mitzvot on the first night of Pesach and all the detailed matters corresponding to the particulars of the redemption from Egypt. So he finishes by explaining that although there are many other mitzvot on the Seder night, the primary mitzvah of Pesach is that of matzah, which replaces chametz, a representative of the Yetzer Hara. This is why the Torah calls it the festival of matzot. Rav Chaim Friedlander explains that this is the meaning of which the disciples of the Arizal stated, one who is very careful not to eat chametz on Pesach and takes upon himself extra stringencies regarding the prohibition is guaranteed not to sin throughout the entire year. The spiritual impact of this mitzvah will protect the person year-round from sin, even inadvertent sin. Okay, so we'll have to stop here.
Well,